Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take sources you're interested in and, well, we pull out the key insights for you. Think of it as a shortcut, really, to getting up to speed without drowning in information. We're here to help you navigate it all.
Exactly. And it's for you, the listener. If you're someone who loves learning, maybe you're prepping for something or tackling a new field or, just plain curious. Our aim is to help you grasp things quickly, see different perspectives, and hopefully have some of those satisfying aha moments along the way.
Okay, so today we're diving into loneliness. It's quite a topic. Our source is a YouTube conversation from the Viet Cetera channel featuring Thuy Minh and Thai Van Linh. She's a well-known businesswoman and investor. The title is Suko Dun, Thai Van Linh, Thuy Minh Yêu Lành, SS2 EP5.
hmm And our goal here, our mission for this deep dive is to really explore loneliness as they discuss it. We want to pull out practical insights, things you can use for managing emotions, dealing with challenges, and also think about the role of relationships, maybe our own inner strength in how we handle these feelings.
Right. So one of the first things that really grabbed me was Thai Van Linh's perspective on sleep. She talks about it almost like a tool, a superpower even, like a
Right.
way to hit reset. She mentioned falling asleep easily, and this is the striking part, sort of forgetting negative stuff, difficulties from the past. What did you make of that?
Yeah, that was interesting. And it kind of contrasts maybe unintentionally with this pressure, especially it seems on women, to always look composed, right?
Yeah.
Thuy Minh's anecdote about the comment someone made, she looks like she just woke up. It really highlights that pressure to hide how you're actually feeling inside.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tai Van Lean builds on that, moving to this idea of actively managing your thoughts, intentionally letting go of the negative ones. She even gave examples like using affirmations, Pamanko, I am healthy, or Jiabinyu, Tung Lin, my family loves Lin. It really points to that mind-body connection. Makes you wonder, though, how effective can that really be? Just deciding to think positive.
Well, if you think about it in terms of like cognitive techniques, it's basically cognitive restructuring, actively changing those ingrained negative patterns.
Mm.
And it brings up that whole issue of vulnerability, particularly if you're in a leadership role,
Mm-hmm.
the lonely at the top thing. Ty Van Lean mentioned sometimes choosing silence, almost as a strategy to manage stress, protect relationships, maybe a kind of self-preservation.
It feels like it, yeah. And picking up on that thread of managing your internal state, the conversation explored how she actually developed that inner strength. She talked about a specific time after pregnancy, dealing with hormonal shifts and negative emotions, and the deliberate work she put in to change her thinking. What stood out for you there?
What was really insightful was how proactive and multi-pronged her approach was. It wasn't just positive thinking in a vacuum. She mentioned researching, changing her diet, cutting back carbs and sugar, things like that,
Right.
and consciously redirecting her focus, putting her energy into her schedule, exercise, family, the parts of work she enjoyed. It sounds like a very intentional retraining of her brain.
It really does sound deliberate, like
Yeah.
taking control. She stressed how important it is to spot those negative thoughts early, before they take over, and interrupt them. She used that analogy of positive thinking being like a muscle you have to train. How does that square with, say, neuroscience?
It fits quite well, actually. Our brains do tend to have a negativity bias. We latch onto negative things more easily.
Hmm.
Maybe it was useful, evolutionarily speaking. So her point about actively replacing negative thoughts, not just trying to ignore them, that's crucial. It requires consistent effort, repetition, like building any new habit, really.
Okay, so later on, they delve into the different facets of loneliness. It's clearly not just about being physically by yourself. Okay.
Exactly. You can feel intensely lonely even in a crowd. They made the point that it's a pretty universal human feeling, even for people who seem really connected.
Hmm.
And there's a useful distinction they touch on. The difference between feeling isolated in your own experience versus realizing, hey, other people have probably faced similar stuff.
Hmm.
That's where things like mentorship or just talking to people with experience can be so valuable. You realize you're not alone in the struggle.
And Tai Van Lean shared her personal mantra, which was quite powerful.
Hãy sống bình thường, mọi người hãy không tin tưởng. Thì mình phải chủ làm những
Oh,
câu còn nó không chủ làm.
Which translates roughly to have what others don't, you have to be willing to do what others won't. She really hammers home the importance of action, of the doing, over just analyzing.
Yeah, and what's interesting there is her comfort with sort of imperfection and trying things out. She uses the phrase lamta, just try it. She accepts that the success rate won't always magically go up, but your ability to handle risk, to adapt, that will improve. That flexibility seems key to her resilience. Definitely. She also brought up this concept of a kukda, a stone, a rock, describing a really solid support system, particularly a life partner. She described her husband that way, someone providing unwavering support, understanding, creating that space where you can actually be vulnerable. That feels huge.
Oh, absolutely. Having that anchor, especially when things get tough, it makes a massive difference. It allows for a different kind of strength, knowing that base is secure. They also hinted at different types of loneliness, like choosing solitude versus loneliness born from fear of rejection or connection issues. It's not all the same feeling.
Which leads nicely into that whole balance between self-reliance and accepting support. I liked the anecdote about her colleague in New York, the one who offered to carry her heavy bag, and the lesson she learned about, just accepting help when it's genuinely offered.
It's such a simple story, but it's a great reminder, isn't it? We don't always have to muscle through everything alone. Letting someone help can be, well, helpful. She also shared her own journey with domestic tasks, initially relying on her mother and then learning to accept and value her husband's contributions. It's about partnership, interdependence.
And they draw that distinction between co-done, loneliness, and co-duck, solitude. That felt important. Solitude can be a choice, right? A positive thing. Whereas loneliness usually feels like an unwanted isolation. They mentioned Thosimin Nim's path as an example of chosen solitude.
It is a useful distinction. Solitude can be restorative. Loneliness often signals a need we want to address. Then the conversation moved into vulnerability in different contexts, like maybe finding it easier to handle a project rejection at work than, say, a romantic rejection that hits differently.
For sure. And that led to talking about building self-confidence almost as a buffer against that sting of rejection. They touched on digging down to root causes, kind of like that 5 whys idea. Keep asking why until you uncover the core issue, which often seems to be related to self-belief or lack thereof.
Right. And the question arose, can you fake confidence? The sense seemed to be, well, you can project it. But genuine confidence often comes from action, from that positive feedback loop where trying things and seeing results build more self-assurance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then the focus shifted towards leadership, confidence, and partnership. This was sparked by a comment someone's boyfriend made, apparently, suggesting that a very confident leader might be difficult in a relationship. That's a common stereotype, I think.
It is, and Tai Van Lean addressed it directly. She reflected on her own past relationships, recognizing she was often the, let's say, stronger force.
Yeah.
And she expressed real appreciation for her husband being an equal, someone who challenges her. It points to the need for balance and mutual respect.
And she made a really critical point about leadership itself. True leadership isn't about demanding people follow you blindly.
No, it's about encouraging independent thought, collaboration. That applies in personal relationships too, I think.
Definitely. They also talked about that experience of having a vision others don't quite see yet. That can be isolating.
Yeah, and it highlights the need for good communication and also being aware that your confidence might come across as stubbornness if you're not careful. Thu Min's comment about noticing Tai Van Lean's facial expressions showing tension was quite revealing there.
It was, and they tackled the perception issue in partnerships where one person is more publicly prominent. Using the comments made about Tai Van Lean's husband as an example, they really stressed his crucial role, supporting her career, her growth, even encouraging her to speak Vietnamese publicly when she was hesitant.
Which brings us to that Sheryl Sandberg quote that your most important career choice is your life partner. Especially for women leaders, that complete support is vital. And they illustrated with practical examples of how Tai Van Lean's husband actively partners in their family life and supports her work. It sounds like a real team effort.
This idea of partnership then broadened out, didn't it, into integrating your personal and professional life more holistically.
Yes, finding work you love, viewing family not as an obligation but as something you want to invest in. When those parts align, it seems to lessen that feeling of being pulled in different directions, maybe reducing isolation.
And that led to thinking about redefining partner and finding happiness more broadly.
Exactly. They acknowledge that a key support figure doesn't have to be a spouse. It could be friends, family, even a really strong sense of self can be a kind of anchor. What seems most important is self-awareness, knowing what you genuinely want and need in terms of connection.
Tai Van Lean shared that reflection about her morning and evening selves being in conflict, seeing that as a sign she wasn't living authentically. That internal clash is a powerful signal.
It really is. And ultimately, they circle back to happiness being the goal, but acknowledging it looks different for everyone. The message is really about defining your own happiness and pursuing it authentically.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive on loneliness, drawing from that conversation, We've touched on managing thoughts, building that inner resilience, knowing when to lean on others.
Hmm. And understanding that loneliness itself is complex, multifaceted, and that connection in many forms is incredibly important.
For you, the learner, we hope this discussion has given you some useful takeaways, maybe some new ways to think about navigating challenges, both personal and professional.
Remember that emphasis on action, unconsciously shaping your mindset, like Tai Van Lean described.
So, here's a final thought for you to chew on. What truly brings you happiness? And what kind of support system, defining that broadly, really empowers you to go after it authentically? Maybe think about how you can build your own inner confidence and when choosing solitude is right for you versus when seeking connection feels more necessary.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep finding those insights that matter to you.